What's up? What it do, Scandalites and Said So Squad? We are in for a treat today, baby, because I don't know if y'all ever heard this, but I've always heard that little Walter was crazy. And I'm not here to say if the man was really crazy or not. But I am gonna say that this man's life was a mother-sucking movie. And honey, we about to get into all this man's hijinks. But before we do, I have to thank my Brenda Angel. Thank you so much, Miss Brenda, for the Amazon wishlist gift that you sent me. I also want to say, make sure you go and subscribe to my husband's channel. It is called The Mysterious Black Bandit. I will pin it in the top comment. He is ready for large-scale subscribers, so make sure you guys go check him out and subscribe. Now, let's go ahead and get to this disclaimer. All of my videos are for entertainment purposes. Everything in them is rumor, gossip, and scandal that I get from books, word of mouth, on TV. Let's get to it. Walter Jacobs was born on May 1st in either 1925 or 1930 in the town of Marksville, Louisiana. His mother's name was Beatrice and his father's name was Adam. When Beatrice gave birth to Walter, her and Adam weren't even together. She had left Adam because Adam was constantly unfaithful. So Adam, mad that Beatrice had left him, came to visit Beatrice after she had given birth to Walter. As soon as he got Walter in his arms, baby, he left and skipped town, took Walter away, and would never tell Beatrice where her son was. When Beatrice finally did find Walter, when he was around 12 years old, Walter always had a chip on his shoulder. You know what I'm saying? My mama didn't really care for me. She gave me up. She kept the other kids. And since little Walter felt this way, Beatrice never got onto little Walter whenever he did something bad. And they say little Walter was bad, baby. That boy was knucking and bucking and ready to fight. Always dropping the other boys in the neighborhood because he wanted their girls, and more than that, their girls wanted him. And because little Walter started to get this reputation as, you know, almost the it boy or the coolest dude around town, older women started wanting him as well. Folks say when little Walter was around 13 years old, this man named Toot Toot came running to Walter's mama's house and he was yelling about how little Walter, he done burned down my barn. You need to get your son. And little Walter's mama is like, Walter, get in here right now. What is this man talking about? Did you burn down his barn? And little Walter is like, no, mama, I didn't. But the man Toot Toot is adamant. Yes, you did, son. You burned down my barn. So little Walter suddenly loses control and shouts out, no, I didn't burn your barn down. I ain't been nowhere near your barn because I was sticking it to Miss Moonoo. And his mama was like, Miss Moonoo? And now Walter Littell was getting all back shy, you know, yes, ma'am, Miss Moonoo. And the reason he was acting like that was because Miss Moonoo was 23 years old to his 13 years old. Said she had a booty you could sit a cup on, honey. And she had a man. And you already know, honey, once you say something about somebody out loud, I don't care how many trusted family members or friends you got around, baby, it's gonna get back to the person. And that's exactly what it did. It got back to Miss Moonoo's man. And so a few days after this, Walter jumped on a train out of town because Miss Moonoo's man was looking for him. And from this point on, for a good chunk of little Walter's life, he became a roamer, getting on trains going from town to town. Also, I have not mentioned it, but he already was playing the harmonica. So with him traveling around to different places, he was just perfecting his craft along the way. So check me out. Gossip claims at one point, little Walter hopped off the train in a town called Caruthersville. In Caruthersville, there was a man with a band by the name of Sunnyland. And so little Walter wanted to play with Sunnyland. And so they became quick friends. And one of the main things Sunnyland talked about was his beautiful chocolate angel named Enid. So little Walter would be listening to Sunnyland talk about this girl. And one day he finally saw her. And baby, she was just as hot as the day is long. So little Walter is like, but that's Sunnyland's girl. But unfortunately for Sunnyland, when Enid saw little Walter, she had the same thoughts about him. She thought little Walter was mega fine. And so as the days went on, Sunnyland would continue drinking and telling his stories about Enid. And he would be like, oh man, her kisses are so soft. It feels like I'm kissing rose petals. And little Walter would just be beside him, shaking his head. Then Sunnyland might say something like, woo, boy, you just don't know. When she put that dark chocolate wetness on me, boy, it's the best thing ever. And little Walter would just be beside him, smiling, shaking, and agreeing to that too. And honey, you never know, but little Walter might have yelled out, "Show you right." Because almost every single night since the day little Walter had met Enid, they had been meeting off up in the fields, baby, tearing it up. And so one day, little Walter is in that field, ready, baby, laid out, spread eagle, with his pants already down to his ankle. And he's just a-smiling as he hears the little footsteps coming through the tall grass. But child, them footsteps stops. Little Walter opens his eyes, and surprise, surprise, he is face to face with Sunnyland. And if you're like me, you would have thought the next move would have been Sunnyland kicking little Walter in his TT. But Sunnyland did not do any of that. Only thing he did was gave little Walter some words, and he ended up kicking little Walter out of his band. And this is probably the only story involving little Walter where he got caught up in some mess and it did not end up in a fight. Because the next situation sure enough ended in a fight, and it almost really cost somebody their life. Allegedly, soon after little Walter left Carruthersville, he ended up going to Chicago. And little Walter is still around 15, 16 years old at this time, but he ends up messing around with a 40-year-old, and her name is Marie. Well, Marie had little Walter all up in her house, you know what I'm saying? She cooking him food, she calling him daddy, and so little Walter is just kind of kicked back, enjoying the fruits, until one day a man shows up out of nowhere, baby, banging on the door. Turns out 40-year-old Marie had been in a relationship for years. I think the man must have been out of town or something like that. Well, the man is knocking at the door. Open the door, nigga. Open the door. I know you in here. Folks done told me Marie got a little nigga in here. Little Walter does not open the door, but the guy ends up busting down the door anyway. And as soon as he gets in there, he is on little Walter, baby. I mean, they are tussling, fighting all which kind of ways. And then the man ends up getting an upper hand on little Walter, and I guess he's kind of on top of him trying to choke him. And child, I guess little Walter thought he was finna die, honey, because the folks say he reached down in his pocket and pulled out a duck-billed knife and then carved the man right across the face. Honey, them folks say that man's mouth fell open like this. Say he got up off of little Walter real quick and started holding his mouth. And so little Walter took that chance to run out of the house. And then he jumped on a train and headed out of town. Now, after little Walter left Chicago, allegedly during his 16th birth year, or when he was 16 years old, he spent that year knocking down church mothers. And I'm talking about knocking them down, blowing their backs out. And I know that kind of just sounds like it came out of nowhere and very awkward. And it is kind of out of nowhere. But I'm telling you, according to the rumors, allegedly when he was 16, he lived with several church mothers. I'm talking about women in their 50s, 60s, something like that. And he was flipping them upside down, had them church skirts going over their heads, and was knocking them down. And that's really all I can say about that. However, when he turned 17, he ended up getting acquainted with musician Sonny Boy Williamson. And Sonny Boy Williamson was alleged to be the world's greatest harmonica player at that time. And so little Walter was said to look up to Sonny Boy Williamson, and he wanted to be just like Sonny Boy Williamson. But then Sonny Boy Williamson died suddenly at the age of 34 years old when he was beat up and robbed at a dice game. And little Walter was very saddened to hear this, but he also felt like he could be what Sonny Boy Williamson was. He could be the world's greatest harmonica player. And he ended up linking up with another young musician by the name of Muddy Waters. And so in the late 1940s, little Walter and Muddy Waters and two other musicians started working and performing together full time. And now, since little Walter had a little bit of money in his pocket, he was ready to get him a steady girlfriend. And so he ends up meeting a light-skinned, slick-haired dreamboat by the name of Ella Mae Taylor. And with little Walter and Muddy Waters signing to Chess record label right after that, it seemed like little Walter and Ella Mae Taylor were in for a lifetime of happiness. But little Walter was just like his daddy, baby, and this man could not stay faithful. The folks say that the women just loved when that tall, slinky harmonica player got on stage. And then when little Walter was around 20 years old, he ended up having a hit song by the name of Juke. It was always played at every juke joint, every club. It was constantly on the radio. And so whenever little Walter, Muddy Waters, and the whole band stepped on stage, the audience always wanted to hear Juke. Well, in this little band, Muddy Waters was the one that was supposed to be set up to be the star. He was the leader of this band. And so the folks say some trouble started because Muddy Waters got a tad bit jealous and he colluded with the executives at Chess Records to keep little Walter in his place. So when little Walter approached the executives of Chess Records and told them about another song he wanted to play, allegedly Chess Records told him, no, we don't like your singing voice. You can't sing that well, and we got Muddy to do that. He can sing and he can play. And gossip claims little Walter, who had no idea that Muddy allegedly was colluding with the execs to keep him down, went to Muddy for help, telling him, tell him, man, tell him about my new song that I can have, and said Muddy wouldn't lift a finger because, of course, he didn't want to threaten his own stardom. And so in the end, something sad happened for everybody. Little Walter ended up leaving the band and going off on his own. And so he signed with the Shaw Agency, and when he first got with them, they were dedicated to making little Walter a star, so they promoted him in ways that he never would have got promoted with Chess Records. And they did a fantastic job promoting him. Baby, did so well that little Walter was booked at the Apollo Theater before Muddy Waters was even thought of going to the Apollo Theater. The Apollo loved that man, as well as every other stage he performed on, because little Walter had it. Baby, let me tell you what he would do. He would have his band already on stage, okay? Everybody playing, they just jamming on stage, but little Walter is nowhere to be found. So the band members hollering around, where Walter at? Hey, y'all seen little Walter? Where that man at? And then right when there's a buildup, when everybody kind of mad, like, I can't believe he didn't show up. Right when this happens, little Walter busts in the doors from the back and comes rushing down the aisle. But here's the kicker though, y'all. It wasn't little Walter himself rushing down the aisle. It was another man that was running, and he would be holding little Walter on his shoulders. And the whole time little Walter is being carried, he's just blowing away on that harmonica. Then when the man finally gets to the stage with little Walter on his shoulders, little Walter makes sure that he's playing some kind of run that takes a deep breath. So it's set up as him playing this long riff, dismounting, moving all around, and getting on the stage without ever removing the harmonica from his mouth. And also, little Walter never takes a breath. So he does all of this on one breath. Oh, baby, the crowd goes wild. They love him. So the man is an entertainer to the max, and this is one of the reasons why he and Ella May didn't work out the way people thought it was going to work out, because the women loved little Walter. Matter of fact, very soon after he signed with the Shaw Agency and started getting all of this brand new fame, he ended up meeting a young pretty thing by the name of Ormy Lee Thompson, and Ormy Lee would do just about anything for little Walter. She would be with him on the road, having fun, going to all these parties, while he had Ella May back at home playing housewife and making sure the bills are paid, house is clean, all that kind of stuff. But even though little Walter was playing between both of these women, the way he was acting out while on the road made it clear that neither of these women were probably going to have him for long. And that's not because little Walter was probably going to go off and choose another woman over them, although that was also very likely, but it was more because he was probably going to get himself taken off the planet due to the dangerous situations he always found himself in. First of all, he was alleged to have had at least 3 car wrecks, and in one of those car wrecks, his band was with him. Per one of the band members, little Walter was driving fast down the road and they were coming up on a curve. Next thing you know, the band members looking like this, because these folks are flying through the air. The car allegedly flipped about 3 or 4 times. Then the folks say one night little Walter was playing at a club and he was drunk and he ended up going outside by himself. Well, when he got out there, a group of white men were out there. And as was common back in those days, one of those white men quickly got slick at the mouth. calling little Walter all kind of darkies, jigaboos, ace of spades. And little Walter, who already didn't take no mess anyway, but now he was drunk, so he sure enough didn't take no mess, started calling out names himself. Ghostface, cracker, baloney back, etc., etc. These white men are taken aback for a minute, you know what I'm saying? Like, what the heck is going on? And then they realize that little Walter, little black behind, is by himself talking to them like this. And so immediately they commenced to whooping him all upside his head and was allegedly beating him for a while until people in the club realized and came outside and chased the white men away. Then you have another episode where little Walter was in the club drunk, and then suddenly he was ready to leave. He had to rush and get away to see one of his women. So he goes out to the parking lot trying to leave, and he sees that he is blocked in by another car. And he also sees that the owner of the car that is blocking him in is just sitting on the hood of the car, chatting with his homeboys, having a good old time. Little Walter is basically like, hey man, I gotta go. I'm trying to go see my girl. Can you move your car? I got to leave. Said old boy, who was clearly looking for trouble, just kind of turned his head and kind of to little Walter and then went back to talking to his friends. So little Walter was like, all right, I got something for your sis, and then immediately walks to the trunk of his car. When he pops the trunk, he reaches in for a tire iron. But why come soon as he got his hands on it, one of them dudes punched him in the back of the head, spun him around, and took the tire iron from him. Child, that man started busting little Walter all upside his head with that doggone tire iron. And not only was he hitting little Walter, all of his friends had jumped in and were beating the H out of little Walter too. Baby, they say it was a terrible beating. In fact, it was so bad that little Walter ended up in the hospital. So that story is wild as heck. But my thing is, I wonder who the woman was that little Walter was in such a rush to see that night. Was it Ella Mae, Army Lee, or better yet, was it another woman that little Walter has started messing around with named Billy? And speaking on Billy, she just might have been the woman that little Walter was rushing to see. Because rumor has it, one night when little Walter was playing at Club Zanzibar, I think that's the club he was playing at. But anyways, he was playing at some club while he was dating Billy, and after he played, he was supposed to rush home and go visit Billy. Well, I don't know if little Walter was having too much fun at the club, or maybe the audience was calling for an encore. Whatever the case, he didn't leave to go see Billy when she thought he was supposed to. And honey, apparently that was a major mistake, because the folks say that little Walter was on that stage playing his harmonica, drinking, laughing, having a good time, when suddenly him and his audience heard somebody screaming like a banshee outside, baby. Just, "You black bastard! You just a liar! I hate you! I'ma fix you!" So the people in the club looking around, and everybody rushes out just in time to see Billy throwing a brick through little Walter's Cadillac windshield. And Billy's crazy tail was on her way to pick up another brick when she heard somebody yell out, "Walter, stop!" Baby, that woman looked over at that crowd and seen little Walter running at her at full speed. And when I say Billy took off, baby, I mean she took off. She was running so fast that she left little Walter behind in a trail of dust. The folks say that little Walter was so upset that he couldn't catch Billy that he instead turned back around and ran to his car, reached in his glove compartment and pulled out a gun and started shooting in her direction. But allegedly, he wasn't really trying to hit her. He just wanted to scare her. But little Walter shouldn't have been shooting at nobody, because it seems like he had a thing for crazy women. See, gossip claimed when Walter would be on the road touring, he would do all of these one-night stands. And what he would do is talk a young lady up in the club, tell her that he's interested, maybe even tell her that he loves her. Whatever he could tell her to get her to take him home or for her to come with him. After he got the woman back to the place, he would lay it down, and then as soon as he was done, he would jump up and start putting on his clothes, and the woman would be laying there, like, "Walter, I thought you said you loved me," or, "I thought you said you was gonna take me with you." And little Walter would have something slick to say, "That's what thought you for thinking," stuff like that. But one time, he tried that with a young lady, and before he could get his funny little phrase out of his mouth, she picked up a wine bottle off the dresser and bust him across his face. Gossip claims he was bleeding everywhere. Allegedly, he had to go get stitches right around here somewhere. And maybe these women would go so crazy over little Walter because of that screenshot that I showed y'all at the beginning of the video when I was talking about him. Baby, the folks say that that thing was stinging so bad that some of these women would sit there and wait their turn. Now, allegedly, Club Zanzibar that I mentioned earlier was a club that little Walter used to perform at all the time. And every time he came there, there was a row of these same 4 to 5 women waiting for him to take them home. But some nights little Walter would be tired and he didn't want to deal with about 4 or 5 women. And so he would hand each woman off to one of his band members and then he would just take one for himself. Well, one of his band members, a man by the name of Luther Tucker, said on these nights when little Walter would just take one woman from himself, it was a fight every single time that happened. Because he said that when little Walter would choose that one girl, all of the other girls would always have something to say. Why are you choosing her for, Walter? What she got that we don't got? Ain't this her second time in a row going home with you? Why you won't choose nobody else? And Luther Tucker said every time without fail, whatever girl that was going home with little Walter would always have something slick to say back. I know y'all ain't sitting up there mad at me because he choosing me. Maybe if y'all wasn't sitting up there musty in between the legs, he would want y'all too. Baby, Luther Tucker said hands and hair and feet and everything will be flying everywhere. The other girls would start whooping up on the one girl. But it didn't matter because the girl that got whooped up on would still take her black and blue behind home with little Walter. And I haven't even talked about little Walter's music career much because of course we talk about the scandals, but a lot of these stories I've told you happened even before one of little Walter's biggest songs of all came out. And that was the song My Babe. So if women were going crazy over little Walter for the little fame he got for Juke, oh, baby, you know it was horrendous when My Babe came out. And while little Walter was having his fun on the road with all of these one-night stands or Ormy Lee Thompson, he was forgetting all about Ella May, and she was starting to feel that. And so around the year 1955, 1956, she ended up leaving little Walter for good. And her leaving was said to have cut little Walter so deeply, he never truly got over her. Even when his main side chick, Ormy Lee, gave birth to his child in the year 1957, a daughter named Marion. Even after that, little Walter still didn't make Ormy Lee his main woman, you know, his old lady. He still wasn't trying to wife her. As a matter of fact, he was too busy messing with other men's wives. One story says he was messing with a cute young married woman and she ended up showing to the club while he was performing one night. And when she got there, she was waving her hands in the audience and she was trying to yell something out to little Walter. So he just basically thought she was saying like, you know, are you coming back to my house tonight? So he pointing and smiling, you know, yeah, I'm gonna get with you. I'm gonna get with you tonight. But in reality, the woman was trying to yell out to little Walter that her husband knew about them and that he was coming to the club right at this instant. While little Walter smiling and pointing and winking and all this kind of stuff, a huge 6'6", almost 300-pound man comes through the club doors and he walks right up to the stage and he yells out to little Walter, "Man, you been effing my wife? Man, nigga, get off the stage right now. Come see me outside." And so little Walter is like, oh, okay. And then he starts looking around at his bandmates, trying to see who was going to go outside with him. But most of his bandmates was like, you know, man, I don't know. Hey, you on your own, bruh. However, Luther Tucker, the man I mentioned in the other story, he said he ended up going outside with little Walter. And Luther Tucker said, you know, he was just a praying when they was walking outside. He just knew it was over with for little Walter especially. So when they get outside, the man is like, over here, little nigga. You been messing with my wife? I'm finna kill you. Honey, Luther Tucker said little Walter slapped the taste out of that man's mouth. Said he slapped him so hard that that big 6'6" man crumbled to his knees. And little Walter just starts wailing on him. And then the man finally gets to his feet and he ends up running to get into his car. Honey, that man got to that doggone car. The car door was locked, child. Baby, they said that man turned around like this and then took off flying down the the alley, said little Walter caught him. He didn't get away like that woman. And said when little Walter caught that big old man, baby said he whooped him out his clothes. Tall, skinny little Walter beat that man's behind, and he would have kept beating it, but the police ended up showing up. And when the police asked what was happening, both little Walter and that man just said, they were play fighting because neither one of them wanted to go to jail. And this is one of many times that the police was on the scene with little Walter. As a matter of fact, they really liked to harass him so they can get him to get all mad and get his temper going. And then they would pull out their batons and they would bust him all across his head. And then on the times where they couldn't route little Walter up enough and they couldn't beat on him, what they would do is go back and get in their car, and then they would be like, come here, son, we got to tell you one more thing before we leave. When he stuck his head in, those crazy cops would roll the window up all the way up to little Walter's neck and then drive around, child, his legs just flying in the wind looking like this. Then you had some situations where little Walter got in trouble with the law, and it really was not his fault at all. Story says one night little Walter was performing at a little small place. I mean, it was so small, you might as well call it a tavern. Well, anyway, as soon as people knew little Walter were coming, they came in and they packed the house out. And then you had this one dude that showed up, and I guess he would be the equivalent of what y'all call YNs today. And I say this dude must have been a YN because when he came to the door and tried to pay his way in, the bouncer told him, hey, can't come in, house is full. What you mean the house full? Do you know who I am? Man, you better move out my way, let me up in this club. And the bouncer is like, hey, bro, no, wait a minute, the house is full. Well, honey, here come the YN, mad, feeling like somebody done him wrong. This dude pulls out a gun, shoots the bouncer, and then when the bouncer drops, he starts shooting all up in the club and ends up hitting somebody else in the eye. Well, when the police came, they locked up the shooter, but they also locked up little Walter because he was the one performing, first of all, and also because they always wanted to pick with him and lock him up anyway. Thankfully, little Walter, as well as his bandmates, had some money to pass around, so, they paid who they needed to pay, and the jailer let little Walter go free. And as far as the shooting, little Walter was very lucky that night to not have been shot because the guy that was shot in the eye was standing very close to little Walter. However, on another night, he was not so lucky. The folks say he was at band rehearsal and he was just kind of anxious, kind of just wouldn't sit down. So the band members are like, Walter, what's wrong with you? Why you acting like that? I don't know, man. Like this girl I'm talking to, I really like her, but I think she's cheating on me. I'm finna go. I feel like she got somebody in her house. And so he takes off to the girl's house. Turns out little Walter's feelings were correct. This girl is butt naked, jumping some guy's bones, huffing and puffing in the bed. Well, little Walter dives on the bed and starts whooping the guy up. And I guess he was whooping the girl up too because allegedly she pulled out a gun and she just ended up shooting and she shot little Walter in the leg. But listen to how crazy this is. Not even a year or two later, little Walter got shot again. Story says he got into an altercation with somebody and he tried to reach for his gun, which was in his pocket, but he made a mistake and pulled the trigger and he shot his own self in the leg, the same leg that the woman had shot him in earlier. And so now little Walter, who had already been walking with a limp from the first shooting, had pretty much totally destroyed his leg. And this allegedly is when he first started to suffer with severe depression. Because for one, he had this smooth walk about himself that he could not do any longer because he had this major limp. And also the way he used to perform, he used to pat his foot, do all this kind of stuff. And he used to walk all across the stage, have folks carry him in, all this kind of stuff. And he couldn't do all of that anymore. But no matter what little Walter felt like his limp was stopping, one thing it definitely was not stopping were the women. And by 1962, the woman that was chasing him the hardest was this little old upcoming singer that allegedly was being passed around the music industry. Now check me out. The folks say that at first, little Walter didn't want to mess around with this singer because he'd heard that when she messed around with folks, when her boyfriend found out, she would get beat up. But this singer always made her way to every single one of little Walter's shows. She really was just always in little Walter's face, begging for him to take her down. Matter of fact, little Walter's sister talked about this singer later on in life, and she said that her brother Walter used to call the singer Trigger. And she said he would be like, Trigger was at the show tonight. Man, that girl practically throwing herself at me, man. She sure do want me bad, but hey, she know that man she got, he crazy, man. And little Walter's sister said he named the singer Trigger because she used to wear these big old wigs and weaves on her head. And he said all of that hair on her head made her look like Roy Rogers' horse, which the horse's name was Trigger. But no matter how much little Walter claimed he didn't want to cause any trouble at home for Miss Trigger, apparently her boyfriend wasn't crazy enough to keep little Walter from taking Trigger down, because allegedly he did take her down multiple times. And this rumor is hilarious to me because allegedly all of this happened in the year 1962. Well, little Trigger and her boyfriend got married in the year 1962. And if you know anything about music couples, you would know I'm talking about Ike and Tina Turner. Girl, them folks say that little Walter was busting Tina Turner's back wide open. Horn said that Tina was crazy over that thing. I sure don't remember that in the movie What's Love Got to Do with It, but let's move on. So anyway, to get back to little Walter's music career, by the time the 1960s had come around, he had left the show agency and he was kind of a freelance musician. You know, he recorded with several labels. He even went back to record with Chess Records a few times. But out of all of this music he was recording, he failed to have another significant hit. And so his career started to slow down a bit. Now, there was a small revival of his popularity in the mid-1960s when all of those boy bands in England, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, and all of that good stuff, when they became interested in the blues music and they started to re-record some of the blues songs, they even brought little Walter over into Europe so he could perform. So like I said, there was kind of a revival of his popularity. But to be honest with you, allegedly, according to little Walter's friends and family, he appreciated this, but he also felt a little weird, a little awkward about it because he felt like these white boys over in England, they didn't know nothing about no doggone blues. So little Walter just felt like it was weird and kind of not right for them to be singing those blues songs. But it was all good. He didn't complain about it to anybody, just kind of the way he felt on the inside. However, once these English bands had moved on and kind of dropped the whole soulful act, the popularity of those blues singers, including little Walter, kind of went back down, became obscure again. And little Walter still had his stage shows, which he still performed very well, and he still pulled in money from that. But he felt like he needed more money, and so he would start to do things like pimp women. He was also allegedly playing dice games all the time. And honestly, he just kind of got on a downward slope. He never had fully gotten over that depression he had because he got shot. His drinking was heavier than ever. And while all of this stuff seemed to be going down, down, and down, little Walter got hit by something even bigger. And that was when he went to the doctor and, per rumor, found out that he was shooting blanks, that he could not have children. And so if he could not have children, then who the heck did Army Lee have that baby Marion by? And so this was said to be a devastating blow. This baby Marion was named after him. And so allegedly he became so angry that he took baby Marion off of his beneficial, the will. She was his, what is it called, y'all? Beneficiary. It said that he was so hurt that he removed her from being his beneficiary, and he ended up putting his sister's name there. Like I stated before, he dealt with all of this negativity and trauma by drinking all the time, hanging out late at night, hanging out with the guys, shooting dice, all of this good stuff. And it was all of this good stuff, or should I say all of this bad stuff, that ended up doing little Walter in. Because the folks say on February the 15th, 1968, he was hanging out late again, and he was at another dice game when he ended up getting into an argument. Gossip claims the guy that he was fighting with picked up a metal pipe and bust little Walter upside the head. And at the same time the guy was swinging, little Walter pulled out a knife and stabbed the guy in the side. Well, after the guy got stabbed, he ran off, and little Walter's friends, or whoever he was hanging around that night, kind of walked him to his house, and then they laid him down beside his current girlfriend, whoever he was with at the time. Well, per the rumor, during that night, the lady who was laying beside him heard a thud. And when she looked, she saw that little Walter had fallen off of the bed. Well, she went to check on him and she noticed that he was deceased. And gossip claims at the time of little Walter's death, he was in between the age of 34 to 40 years old, with most records saying he was actually 37 years old. And let me go ahead and say this. I know that many of you guys watching this are probably like, that ain't how he died. He died like this. And I am not here to tell you that you are wrong, because baby, let me tell you, there are several different stories and theories as to how this man passed away. I'm just telling you what I saw in a book. But this is the end of the old Hollywood scandalous tale of the musician Little Walter. And I don't know, just, you know what I'm saying? I mean, the man passed away at a very early age, but it is a wonder that this man made it to 37 years old after all that doggone stuff, y'all. So anyways, if you guys like this video, please, please, please like this video. If you guys are new here, please subscribe and turn your notifications on for all. Don't forget, go subscribe to my husband's channel, The Mysterious Black Bandit. Also, do not forget about my mother's channel, DIYW with Denise. I hope you guys have a great night. I will see you soon. Bye.